And phase one basically is the data gathering phase of the study. We've conducted a whole wide range of data collection. We've taken traffic counts. We've worked with the MPO, Houston Galveston Area Council, to try to get regional demands along the corridor. It's this phase one that will kind of work to set the bedrock for future corridor alternatives that we'll look at in phase two. Phase one is anticipated to wrap up here this summer in 2018, and then from there we'll move rapidly into phase two, where we'll begin looking at alternatives. Okay, so just to kind of give a roadmap, if you will, of phase two, we'll start off by identifying the true needs of the corridor. That's what that data that we collected in phase one was all about, to understand the needs. And with those needs identified, we can identify kind of the goals that we want to try to alleviate and help out on the corridor. We'll start off by looking at the whole universe of different alternatives in the 45 corridor. That could mean things like extra lanes. It could mean improvements to the interchanges at 242 or something like that. It could also mean different modal options. We'll look at things like transit, amongst other things. We'll start off at the universe, like I say, and we'll develop a methodology plan to kind of whittle those universe of alternatives down to a set of viable alternatives. We're working to try to have about 2 to 3 viable alternatives that we can then take forward into that environmental process that I mentioned a few minutes ago. That's basically the handoff, if you will, of this planning study to the more detailed level study that will look at those viable alternatives in a lot more detail. Okay? So with that, I want to introduce Ms. Ines Owida. She's our consultant project manager, and she'll go through some of the data that's been collected so far and some of the corridor characteristics that we found so far with the 45 corridor.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity today to present our project to you. My name is Ines Owida. I'm the project manager with AECOM, overseeing this study and all the aspects of the study. I just want to give you some of the data that we've already collected and just go through where we are in the process. And if I'm getting too technical, tell me, move faster. Just some of the things we do is look at the corridor first, identify really what are the basic things along the corridor. And basically we know that it's a 4-lane facility in each direction. We have a diamond lane that comes from Cypress Wood Drive up north. And south of there we have that reversible HOV lane that we need to somehow figure out how to connect it and maybe improve on that situation. We also, looked at, as Patrick has mentioned, we went out there and we did an extensive data collection in which we took actual counts to see what's going on along I-45. And the graph that you see here or on the slide shows you that the volumes at I-45 just north of Beltway 8 go about 250,000 vehicles, and then as we move forward we start dropping, the numbers go down, but then we hit Hardy and then all of a sudden the numbers start going up, goes up to 244 just north of Hardy, and then they start going down again up until we get to about Loop 336 where we end up with about 133,000. So there's a lot of traffic that is dispersed through the area, and it ends up the through traffic, you go from 275, there is only 133 that end up just going north of Loop 336, which is north of our limits. One of the things that we look at what's happening in the area as a whole and what do we expect the traffic to occur. As you know, the Houston area is expecting to grow with another 1.5 million additional jobs. That's gonna turn into 400 million additional people living in our area, 60% increase in traffic, and 100% increase in freight traffic. This is just trucks moving through the area. So, you know, we need to be prepared for the future. We cannot ignore those facts and what's going to be ahead of us. So that's why we start looking at the traffic pattern. And what you see here on this slide is what's happening on the AM movement as well as the PM movement. When we do those studies, we focus on the traffic in the AM peak hour as well as the PM peak hour. And as you notice, the PM, which means traffic in the evening, is much worse than the traffic in the morning. Although we do have some sections that experience some congestion in the morning. The graph here shows red. Whatever you see in red, that's bad, that's F, that means it's failing or we're not moving the traffic as fast as we like to move it. If the color is green, which means, hey, it's moving well, things are good. The yellow, it's you know, we can deal with it. It's not too bad. So yellow is kind of fair. So that's how we look at those, at that graph. Not only we looked at the main lanes, but we looked at all the intersections along the corridor. And what we noticed again, the PM movement is much worse through the intersections than the AM movement. But in your particular area, all the intersections need to have a closer look at them because the delays at those intersections are unacceptable in the way we look at the delays, the regular delays at intersection, and especially in peak hours. So part of the study is having a closer look at the corridor and how it functions as well. In terms of time travel along the corridor, what we look at the cars that use the corridor and how long will it take them to get from one end to the other. This graph, what it shows you, the AM and the PM movement, if you're going northbound along I-45, that's from Beltway 8 all the way to Loop 336, it should take you 22 minutes. That's if you're going the speed limit, going along there is 22 minutes. But what it takes you is 27 minutes in the AM. And if you are there in the PM, it takes you 41 minutes, which means, you know, for that section on the northbound, the PM has 19 extra minutes of delays in the PM versus 5 extra minutes in the AM. If we are going southbound, what you notice, you're going to have 7 minutes delay in the AM and 10 minutes delay in the PM. And so this is really just to summarize that your PM movement is the worst movement. Again, you know, it takes you much longer time than what it should take you to travel through the corridor. Another thing we look at in the data, we look at the origin destination, or what we call it select link analysis. We take one slice at a roadway and we say, if we have 100% of the cars at one area, how do they distribute along that corridor? So the first one that you see, which is the one that is from Beltway 8, if we look at the traffic all the way from Beltway 8, moving up, we notice that about 60% is dispersed in the, you know, in the zone that is in immediate, which is from Cypresswood to Greens, and 8% goes from Hardy to Cypresswood, and then we have 12% is from Crichton to Hardy, and the rest of it goes up to Loop 336. But if we look at the traffic that's approaching this area from the Grand Parkway, which is the middle graph, you notice that 50% of it continues along that area or dispersed through that area, but 20% come to y'all's area, and about 14% south of here. But if we look at the traffic coming from Conroe, 60% gets to be distributed within this area, and the rest of it goes south of this area. So it kind of helps us to see, you know, the through movement from the ones that come and circulate within the area. One other thing we look at is also safety. We take 5 years. We look at crashes that occur for the last 5 years. In this case, we looked at it from 2012 to 2016, and what we have here is about 12,000 total crashes along the corridor. That comes to about 6 crashes per day along the segment of I-45 from Beltway 8 to Loop 336. And we dig deeper into those numbers to see how many of those crashes resulted in injuries. Out of those crashes, we have about 2,800 crashes that resulted in injuries, which is basically 11 crashes per week result in injury. And then we go one step further because we want to focus on those severe accidents that result in fatalities. And there are 222 fatalities that occurred with that time period, which is about 4 crashes per month are fatal or incapacitating. That's serious accidents, 4 per month. So then we looked also about pedestrian as well as bicycles. That's always important to look at. And 33 crashes involved pedestrians, 12 involved bicyclists, maybe on the frontage road. We don't know exactly, but most likely on the frontage roads in these cases. Part of our data collection is also paying attention to the freight that uses this corridor. I-45 is a major corridor for freight movement. So if we look at the volumes there, and we have a lot of trucks use this corridor. If the trucks park back to back, they can go from Houston to Dallas every day. That's how many trucks go through this area. So 17,700 trucks a day go through this corridor. 180 million gallons of petroleum gets moved along this corridor. 16 billion pounds of food, which turns about 10 billion meals a day, goes along this corridor. Beltway 8 at I-45 is the 13th worst interchange in Texas in regards to freight movement, and 74th worst in the country. So those statistics help us to kind of put things in perspective. So we gathered all this information. The next thing we did is we had a series of public meetings that we held on February 27th, March 1st, and March 8th. We took all these numbers and all these displays and we showed it to the public at those meetings so that we can also gather input from the public and see what they can tell us about the corridor. And we gathered input through, we showed them the boards. We had some public surveys out there for them to fill out, as well as we have some interactive boards in which people went there and put some tags, so we ask questions just so that they can get involved and, have interactive session with them. And I'm going to share with you, this is just the form that we had out there. We made it very simple for the people to follow so, we get more participation in those surveys. And I'm going to share with you today the results of what we've heard, at least at those public meetings. There were only 54 responses is what we got. 93% believe reducing congestion is important to promoting economic development in the area. And 31%, they regularly use the HOV lane along there, or the diamond lane. And 83% think that, that improvements are needed to better accommodate the traffic during hurricane season with I-45. I guess hurricane season is around the corner. Again, 62% told us that they think 5 minutes of delay for a 10-mile trip is acceptable. So we wanted to know what's the tolerance for the people along the corridor when they travel along there. And 62% 5 minutes. If I can delay it 5 minutes, I'm okay, but not more than that. Buses and rail are perceived as multimodal. That's what people think when you tell them what is multimodal. They think of buses and they think of rail. And they feel that those options could improve I-45. And the top concerns we heard, from our people that are in residences, businesses, those are the type of people we heard from. And they also worried about floodplain, about their business, how it's going to be impacted if we do any type of improvement, if they live along there, how it's going to impact them. And 89 of the people that attended supported us doing something along that corridor. One other thing that we did is we asked the people on a map to tell us locations where they perceive there are problems and tell us what those problems are. So we received 113 total stickers during those meetings. And I'm going to focus today on Shenandoah and what we heard in your area. What we did with those comments, we put them into categories. We put category that if the comment is related to traffic, we put it under traffic. If it's related to the geometry and the design of the roadway, or if it's related to safety or some other issues, so we can better understand the issues along there. And what you see here, the first one is the comments we received regarding the traffic. So you know, without going through those, we're going through every comment, we're documenting it, and we're going to go back as we start putting workshops together to look at the corridor as a whole, so we got better understanding. So, you know, like some of them said, 242, please do something there, if it's main lanes or frontage roads. Research Forest Drive, they talked about congestion near Woodlands Parkway. They talked about improving Robinson and that intersection. That's when it comes to traffic. Moving forward to geometry, some of them told us like ramps, you know, we need more acceleration lanes, that's too short, or need direct connection in some locations like at 242 going eastbound. Wider frontage roads, remove an exit ramp lane or something or the other. So we're going to look at all those closely in the next step. Again, talking about merges and distances and ramps, you know, so. From flooding and safety, what we've heard is that 242 experiences some flooding in there, so we need to look closer into that. And then safety concern at Robinson and Woodlands Parkway, those two locations that were pointed out by the public. Again, those are public comments and what we've heard from the public. And, you know, we had a whole lot of comments, of course, up and down the corridor, but I wanted to focus on this area, I think, today. These are the active boards that we used, and the top 4 goals for the I-45 from what we've heard is to reduce congestion, that's 69 counts for that. Improve connections to I-45, we got 41 counts to that. Provide alternative modes of travel, actually we got 30 counts for that. And then improving safety with 24 counts. The other interactive board we had is to help us understand what are the top priorities, and number 1 came as build a new commuter rail line. The next one was improve frontage roads in intersections. The third one is reconstruct existing intersections. Fourth one is complete State Highway 99 connections. And number 5 is add more east-west crossing at I-45 North. So that's for a total sticker of 244. So really, what Patrick said is that now what do we do from this point forward is what kind of solutions are we going to consider? We're open. Everything is on the table. Nothing has been removed right now. So we're going to look at a universe of alternatives. It's whatever we've heard, whatever is something that we need to look at, we'll give it a look. And then we're going to evaluate them. It's kind of like a funnel. You put everything in the funnel, and then we're going to start weeding out those that have some fatal flaw that there's no way you can implement them. Either they're cost prohibitive, or they just don't make sense at all from an engineering point of view, or they don't support the need and purpose for the study. So it's very important for us to establish a strong need and purpose for the study, because everything, if you don't meet the need and the purpose of the study, it should be thrown out. And that's part of the NEPA process. So we're going to look at different wide variety of options when we move forward. And the question is, how can you all get involved? How can everybody get involved? Besides attending the public meeting, we have established 2 committees. One that we call the Project Ambassador Committee, and those are the elected officials and leadership from planning agencies and local government. And then we also have a stakeholder committee, which is representatives from school district, chambers, management district, emergency services, and elected official. What we do, we meet with them, this is like a smaller group, not like a public meeting, and we go through step by step as we go along the project. We brief them on what we're doing. We like to get input from them. We poll them sometimes about things to get their input, and it helps us with the dialogue to hear from those people, because they represent the people, and we want to make sure that we hear from everybody, beside the fact that we will still have a series of public meetings in which we'll be coming out for more input from the public. And with that, I think, I don't want to skip that one, but maybe you want to cover how they want to.
Oh, certainly you can always contact me. I'm the TechStop project manager. My information is on the slide. We've also created a TechStop website that is live, that you can access the latest information. I believe that the PAC and stakeholder exhibits are already posted on that TechStop website, as well as some of the information from our public meetings are actually already out there. In the months to come, we do anticipate putting together a more robust website just for this I-45 study. It's in the works, but I'll be looking for that as we move over into the phase 2, which is really where we're going to be looking at alternatives.
Perfect. Anybody got any questions for either one of the?
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate all the work you're doing, looking out for us.
Thank you for the work and thank you for the presentation. Appreciate the residents getting a chance to hear that, and especially the findings. I know I was at the Oak Ridge for getting to see some of that and participating in some of it, but it's interesting to get to hear the feedback from what the comments y'all got and the different findings. So that's neat to be able to get that shared with us. So thank you very much. So, okay. Well,
thank you.
Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will move into item 6, which is Citizens Forum, and we will start with Alex Warmath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the distinguished councilman and the mayor. Just wanted to point out, we recently held a trash bash, which I think all our community benefits from in the city of Shenandoah greatly. And unfortunately, I showed up at 8:30 and there was a long line of cars and I still had to get something done at work, so I sped down to work, did a little work, came back at 10:30 and the trash bash was closed. They wouldn't accept any more stuff. I had a car full of trash that I pulled out of the attic that needed to get trashed. So unfortunately I went back home, took the stuff out of the car, put it upstairs in the attic again, and I'll wait for the next trash bash. But when they're 6 months apart, we the need as a city to have more opportunities, maybe once every 4 months versus once every 6 months, or B, have more dumpsters to fill and put trash in. Because certainly when we close it before 10:30, because I got there about 10:31 or 2 and it was closed, maybe, you know, we just need a solution because it's obviously well received by our community. I am concerned that as I looked at that first when I got there, and I've been to a couple of trash bashes, I'm not 100% sure all these people that are attending our trash bashes are residents of Shenandoah. And I don't want them free riding on all the great work that we're doing here for our city and making it less of a benefit to our citizens. So I thank you for that and I wish you'd consider that issue. I have a second comment, and you know, I want to acknowledge our mayor and Mr. Henson in the way they're conducting their campaign. Unfortunately, you know, in Washington, D.C., they seem to conduct a campaign that is mudslinging, underhanded, name-calling, everything under the sun from A to Z. And Mr. Mayor, I thank you for your efforts, and Mr. Henson, I don't see him. I thank him for his efforts of trying to keep this a civil type event. You know, we all live in this small community. We're all citizens. We all want to work for the same effort and energies to make our city a better place. And I'm way excited for that. And I'm into the debt of each of you up here and each of the past mayors and each of the past councilmen who have done a lot of heavy work and heavy lifting. However, I got extremely disturbed most recently by Mr. Beavers. Tremendous upsetting to have a city official reflect a Facebook post that in effect colored many of our residents, colored us as crooks, as naive, and as, I wrote it down because I've never quite seen that comment before, hard-headed or bone-headed or some type of headed. We don't need anything of that nature in our city. I mean, we all need to be pulling on the same end of the rope. It's discouraging that we hear comments from you, Mr. Beavers, on your Facebook page of that nature. Our mayor and Mr. Henson are working hard to carry out a good campaign, above board, without disrespect for each other or dirt slinging or mud slinging. And to see you come forward and make allegations that offended me personally, I assume they offended a bunch of other citizens very much so. I know, Mr. Mayor, you've stood up for above board campaigning. I know, Mr. Beavers, you support the mayor. I don't believe that's the kind of support our mayor wants. I think you owe our mayor an apology. I think you owe me an apology. And I think you owe some other citizens an apology, because I find it offensive to be be colored by the comment that Judge Scalia made. And I respect Judge Scalia infinitely. He is a man of great stature. But it's disturbing, it's offensive, and it's out of place. And I still believe you owe your mayor apology, you owe myself an apology, and you owe our citizens an apology to try to color people. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, the other person we had signed up was Jano Houston. And just to remind residents, the council members cannot deliberate with you, and comments are restricted to 3 minutes in time. Hello, Jana.
Hello, my name is Jano Houston. I live at 502 Hickory Ridge here in the Valley. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Thank you for allowing me to speak in front of you this evening. I am going to ask the question, what is doom and gloom? Now, is that holding elected officials accountable for words and actions? Is that gloom and doom? Because if it is, then yeah, I'm part of gloom and doom. But I don't think gloom and doom equals accountability. Councilman Beavers, I'm up here about that recent Facebook post. You discuss your support for Mayor Wheeler, and you ask people to look at our accomplishments, but you only mention you and Mayor Wheeler in your post. Now, perhaps you meant to mention more people, but I'm going to take you at your words. And I want to consider a couple of things as we go forward tonight. You mentioned in the most general of terms, with no exact facts or figures, that you reduced city spending. What are all the facts? What are the figures in this item? And you have said from the dais that you are a numbers man. I see a lack of numbers in that particular item on your post. The question is, it might be true, but is it truly, fully truthful? Okay? So in the most recent mayoral forum, Mayor Wheeler stated that the revenues for the city were up approximately $500,000. He also stated the city would be on track to have a $1 million excess revenue should that trend continue over the next year. I think that's true, actually. However, this is in the general sense. But for those of us who deal with budgets, is it fully truthful? The question is, and maybe what's not stated, but equally important to mention, especially for Tea Party endorsers, that the amount of money is also being spent, and we need to look at the spending. So here are a few questions that objectivity and intellectual honesty ask. You claim in Facebook that you settled a lawsuit caused by a previous city council. Who was on the city council that caused the lawsuit? If it was the previous city council, 3 of those members are sitting up here with you today. Mayor Wheeler, Councilmember McLeod, and Councilmember Raymaker. They didn't cause that lawsuit. Are you intimating something else? Did the previous city council just decide to enter into a lawsuit with an unsuspecting entity? Or, as you very well know, were there principled, not political, but principled reasons for entering into that situation? If it was only a certain member on the previous city council, who caused the lawsuit? Who was it exactly who caused it?
Jana.
Name names. Was it in alphabetical order? Was it Councilman Frazier? Was it Councilman Houston? Was it Councilman McLeod, Raymaker, or Councilwoman Teague? Maybe it was Mayor Wheeler. It was none of them. Did the previous city council ever receive information from the city attorney? Don't we have the same city attorney sitting with us here today? Did he counsel them? Is he counseling you? Did he counsel you? Are you accusing him of the lawsuit? What about the city engineer, better yet the project manager in charge of the city park at the time Qscape was supposedly performing their work, who had oversight and direct management of that project involved in the lawsuit? Are you accusing the city engineer of malfeasance? He's not to blame. Are you saying the project was mismanaged? I've checked my facts. Mr. Joseph Pert was not the
Ms.
Public
Houston?
Works Director,
Ms.
nor was
Houston.
he the project
Ms. Houston,
manager.
We're over the time. I'm sorry.
All right, well, let me just close with saying this. I will discuss this in public with anybody who wants to come and have the conversation. And even if you disagree with me, let's sit down and let's have the conversation. We'll bring the figures. It's not the fault of these people here. It's Qscape's fault.
Okay.
And you cannot accuse previous city council members for causing a lawsuit that they did not cause.
Thank you, Ms. Houston. Okay, well with that, we will move into item 7, which is a presentation by Travel Click.
Council, in getting ready for the budget for the CVB and in getting ready for the CVB audit and consulting, we are looking at different programs that we might want to institute next year. We are bringing one of those programs to you. Our representative tonight is local, and he was available to be here tonight, so we've given him just a few minutes, promise, just to talk to you. He's got about 3 or 4 slides, so I'm going to be playing slide man for him.
I'm related to that Micro Machines guy that can talk real fast. So I want to thank you to the council and the mayor this evening for letting me speak and present. My name is Richard Knopfel. Yes, I am with Travel Click. I'm their director of sales here in Houston and also work with the beach communities here in Texas. So I'll just get right into it. As she said, looking at a project with the CVB, Travel Click works specifically with CVBs all around the country. I myself work with Houston, San Antonio, Arlington, and working with projects coming up with Galveston, Corpus Christi, and South Padre. So what I want to do is just give you a little bit about Travel Click because it's not a household name. But within the hotel industry, we are. We service over 50,000 hotels across the globe. 13 different offices across the world, and with that, a little over 1,000 employees. In that, services that we provide to them are a number of technology solutions, advertising solutions, business intelligence solutions. Anything from a client booking a hotel on a hotel's website to advertising to you online or to business travelers for their travel agents. But tonight I'm going to specifically speak about the solution that we provide to the CVBs. What we have built in place is a solution that no one else has. We have exclusive contracts and negotiated deals, really partnerships with all the major hotel brands, even some of the smaller ones as well, where we're able to acquire their forward-looking data or their forward-looking booking data for their hotels for up to a year. So the hotels that are here in Shenandoah are already subscribed, not even subscribing, they're submitting their data to us from the hotel brands. Hilton, Marriott, Starwood, IHG, they all give us this information. Now, why and how is this important to the CVBs? I don't know anything else that can give you forecasting data, not even forecasting data, give you hard data of what kind of revenue you might be bringing into the city. Another aspect of the information related to the demand data is understanding how to better serve the clients that want to stay here in Shenandoah. If you have a group that wants to book a certain time period during the year, you want to see where you're at. Instead of having to call up the hotels individually, you can actually look at the data and see where there are soft spots and where there's areas of compression, what we call, where you're just overbooked. With that, we give you the ability to see your competitors as well. Normally the competitors are hotels competing against each other. We let you look at other cities. So like it's a little bit larger scale, but the city of Houston, they actually pull all the data for Houston and they look at the bookings for Atlanta, Chicago, San Antonio, and one other one, but sorry. But that at least gives you a better understanding of where you're going. And I touch on this a little bit, but being able to accurately forecast and understanding income futures that are coming in from the hotel business is tantamount. It gives a better idea for budgeting for down the line. With this data, we also give you a year backwards. So you're able to not only see what's in forward, but as we're dealing with now, Shenandoah had a decent end of year last year, regrettably because of the Harvey hurricane. But with that, you can actually start preparing for that revenue that's not going to be here at the end of Q4. Hopefully, not at the end. So I keep it quick. I keep it brief. Any questions?
In the presentation, I saw that you're providing the 1 year of data.
Yes.
To do the forecast on. They do use the term data warehousing. It's generally accepted in data warehousing that you have 5 years worth of data to base those forecasts on. Will you have more data in the future?
No, because that's specifically dealt with regards to the brands. What we're doing is we're pulling that information, if not from brands, what they call PMS, property management system. We're bringing it from their data warehousing platform. Hotels, they don't want to give us that much data out. Now, for the CVBs, understandably, they would like to see 3 to 5 years out in the future. Regrettably, we don't have that data just because the brands don't want to go that forward. They're looking for predictability in a much shorter term.
In the contract, then, are we allowed to export data so that we could create our own base?
Well, the data we're going to be providing you, we're not going to be giving you each hotel names. We're going to be breaking it down by their tier. There's a mid-tier, a low tier, and a high tier.
Do we ever own the data?
You own it in an Excel spreadsheet, yes.
So I can download it, I can export it, I can do whatever I want to. I can load it into SQL Server if I choose.
Yes, you can. We actively recommend our clients to be able to put this into a visualization tool to better see where the trends are at. Because what we do is we're providing you raw data in an Excel spreadsheet, and it's analysis paralysis if you just look straight at it. So if you're not...
Are you using Tableau?
Yeah, that's actually the city of Houston's using Tableau.
And then how long is the agreement?
It tends to stick with a 1-year agreement.
That's all I have.
I think this is fantastic. This is exactly the kind of stuff we need to be looking at for CVB and increasing hotel stays. So I'm assuming we can correlate your data with events that might happen. So we have an event that goes on nearby. Maybe there's something big in Conroe, and we can kind of start seeing uptakes, and maybe this particular event pulls in the mid-tier hotels, the people who go to this event. Yeah. So we can correlate that, and that way we can go, okay, well, let's advertise to people who are going to this event to help us fill
exactly.
these beds up.
It makes it to, I'll give you an example with San Antonio. With the data we provided them, when we were sitting down with them last September, and they just at that time period learned that November was going to be a soft month, and they only learned that from their internal data. When we went through the sample data that we provided to them back in February, if they dug a little bit deeper, they would have known back in February that they were going to be soft in November, and they could have planned accordingly for advertising either traditionally or digitally to shore up that soft month, and you can do that really with any kind of event you have coming up.
One of the things I like about this from a CVB type perspective is they can call us and say, like you were pointing out, that I don't know if everybody picked up, somebody who wants to have an event can actually call somebody like our CVB and say, I'd like to host an event somewhere between October and into November, December. What are the best weeks for that? What's the best time for that? And they can go, look, second week of October, we're looking like we're going to have empty beds, empty hotels. Obviously that's almost a year out is when you're going to be planning events like this, a year, 2 years out. You can say, well, traditionally this is a soft time or a weak time for us. So we can then use that data as a CVB to, and the fact that we would have that data and that access, someone could call us up.
That's exactly
whereas a lot of CVBs wouldn't have that information because they're like, well, who do I call? Like you said, you're chasing your tail. Well, if we can be in a position where you can call one place and say, I want to host a meeting, I need this many rooms, I need this many bodies, I need this size conference room. And you can go, yeah, we've got that.
Exactly.
This is the best time to do it.
I mean, for me, how I got into this with the CVBs is jokingly trust but verify. One of the problems what they always had was contacting the hotel partners and getting accurate data. With this, you really are going to see what's on the books. And as you said, you're able to not only do this for certain groups are coming in for events, but also business travel. You have ways to advertise to business travel through the agents that are booking this area or surrounding areas and bring them into this area. It's really, I'll put it this way, it's probably the easiest thing our group has been able to showcase to another group and see the validity in it.
So I noticed on here we have a budget for $20,000. I didn't hear anywhere in the presentation the cost.
For this, I think that was a rough idea. It's probably with regards to the competitive set of getting to other markets, it's probably sitting more closer to $30,000. So
for a 1-year contract.
For a 1-year contract, yes.
I think that obviously we'd have to see what the return on investment was, but I think this kind of stuff and Expedia ads and any of this targeted advertising and being in a position where we can answer these questions, which up until now we haven't been able to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is I understand with Expedia you do have a lot of a great ability to target, but you also have the ability to target for yourself. Expedia is an online travel agent, and they take a big chunk of change from when they take a booking. And I'll be quite honest, a hotelier will tell you right now, they'd rather have someone pulling a suitcase than a cooler, and more times than not, that's what happens with what we call OTAs. You have the ability yourself to create your own digital campaigns with whatever agencies you're working with, and really be the master of your own domain.
Good. Anybody got anything else?
I've answered everything I have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move into item 9, which is discussion and possible action. I'm sorry, we're item 8, discussion and possible action regarding a contract for the 2022 Women's Golf Championship.
This is the last of our NCAA bids that we were awarded. It's for the 2022 Women's Golf Tournament. Stephanie and I have been working on this to try to get an idea of a cost. Of course, it's 4 years down the road, but they're wanting us to go ahead and sign a contract now, so we wanted to bring you information and get input from you as council. We just finished the SCAC conference championships yesterday, so we have some figures that we used as a basis for our budget. This is on a much larger scale than what the SCAC was. NCAA has a lot of requirements that SCAC did not have, so more areas for cost. The budget right now, the way we see it with the current costs that we know are pretty good because we've just gone through it, we're looking about $368,000 to do this in 2022. You'll notice that it's gonna, the biggest expense is $130,000 to rent the golf course. We don't have one. So we're coming to y'all for direction as to how you want to go with this because they have sent us the contract.
Mayor, I motion that we reject this bid.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilman Fletcher to reject the contract. We have a second by Councilman Raymaker. Do we have any discussion?
I think any contract that we enter that's an open checkbook is not responsible on our behalf whatsoever, and that's what this contract is. I don't think that for a city that doesn't have a golf course that we should try to sponsor a golf championship in somebody else's city. I don't understand why that even came up to begin with, but I just don't see spending this kind of money out of our CVB that it's beneficial to our city.
I know for me, my concern was that the original budget presented was $100,000. We're about $270,000 over that, and I don't ever want to see another one of these things again come in like this. We either budget it and estimate it properly, or we don't get involved.
I don't often agree with Ted, but in this case, and I agree, this is a little different than some of our other ones we've discussed. This is far enough out that we can let NCAA know this isn't going to fly, and they've got plenty of time. We're not putting any sort of stress on them to find another place that's happy to write a check like this. The other thing we talked about was the number of people that this would bring in, and it's really not very many overall in terms of being here, and so I tend to agree with the two gentlemen down at the other end of the dais that $370,000 for a handful of people is just really not acceptable. So,
I guess the other part for me was that even the sales pitch here that I see sent to the NCAA, it's pitching Houston. It's not pitching Shenandoah. It's pitching Houston. And it also cites that we have a relationship with Special Olympics. And my understanding is we do not have an ongoing relationship with Special Olympics. So I'm wondering why this kind of information gets put into a letter to the NCAA falsely.
Any more discussion?
I'd like to hear if Bill has any comments on all of this.
As far as I'm concerned, we have right now no contractual obligation, and that's right. You're free to turn down this bid, and that's what I think you have the right to do.
Is that all?
That's it.
Well, just playing devil's advocate, we do have to spend so much advertising.
You know I was about to play devil's advocate.
So I was just throwing that.
A lot of online ads for that.
So what I will say, and please don't anybody jump to the gun here, I don't want to spend $360,000 to play golf. I don't get to play golf anymore. What I will say is I think there might be an opportunity here to reach out to the Woodlands, and maybe we could do some sort of a handoff to the Woodlands where they might want to sponsor something like this with their CVB. We might be able to jump in a very small portion of it just to be able to advertise Shenandoah to whatever extent we might want to advertise and spend that money and see our bang for our buck back. But I think, you know, to Ted's point, we don't have a golf course. They do. This seems like a whole lot more important to them. But I think we might be able to use this to come up with some viable solutions from the NCAA that still helps the entire region, instead of just telling them no thanks, go away.
Okay, so would you
I
like
that
us to
thought.
do
That's a good idea, actually.
Like us to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we
Okay.
can start with, we don't like the contract, so we're not going to sign it, but we have some ideas.
Okay, we can do that.
And maybe reaching out to the Woodlands, to their CVB, and I know the greater Houston area, and I don't know what it's called, but the greater Houston area CVB we've talked about when it relates to NCAA type events, they may have some participation that they'll pitch in. So I think we could have a couple of different entities jump in on this and still keep this within in the region so that there's some benefit for everybody.
Okay, so what I will do, or Stephanie will do, whichever one, we'll contact NCAA first and find out if we can do that, because it was bid with us being the host and UMHB.
But maybe we can be the coach with the Woodlands as a co-host.
We can definitely check and see if there's any problem with that, and then go forward with that.
Great.
Before voting to reject the contract, should we table it and bring it back? Because we may need to assign it, or?
It might not be a bad idea to table it, only so that we could reach out to the Woodlands and see if they're even game for that before we go throwing a bomb at the NCAA.
I think that's a good idea. I'll withdraw my motion to reject the contract.
Yeah, we can contact the Woodlands first, and then.
Motion to table.
All right, I'll
And
second
so we
that.
can contact the Woodlands and contact.
See if they're even game.
See if they're even interested.
But we have no intention of paying it.
Yeah.
Now, that's just what we figured right now. You know, that's still 4 years down the road.
Yeah.
And Debbie,
Yeah.
we don't want you to take this personally at all. We know you didn't have anything to do with this.
No.
You're just presenting us with the
I'm the
bad news
messenger.
that you were dealt and from what we were handed to begin with 2 years ago. So, no problem.
Okay, so I have a motion to table. I have a second. I have a motion by Councilman Fletcher to table. I have a second by Councilman Raymaker. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to table carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Agenda item 9, discussion and possible action regarding an agreement with Cobb Finley for inspection services.
Really quickly, Mayor, Council, this is an agreement with Cobb Finley to provide inspection services for the Fiber to the Home project. Because this contract, or this agreement, I should say, was likely to exceed $15,000, I wanted to bring this before Council to be in compliance with the city's purchasing policy. You can also take a look on the agreement. The city attorney added some language there which would allow them to proceed forward with the signature. So we didn't want to slow the project down by basically adding some language that they could not exceed $15,000 without prior council approval. So that's why this is before you now.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion?
I make a motion we approve it.
A second.
I have a motion by Councilman Broad. I have a second by Councilman Beavers. Do we have any discussion?
Is this part of the total cost of the 1.5 million? Is this part of that, or this is in excess of that?
In excess.
It's an addition.
Do we anticipate any additional costs? This is the only in excess cost we're looking at? Okay.
It's not a blank check.
No.
No.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain.
Motion carries 4-0 with one abstention, being Councilman Raymaker. Item 10, discussion and possible action regarding a Thornwood lift station generator replacement.
So this item is regarding the Thornwood, it's a backup generator that we have at the Thornwood lift station that's located at the very end of Thornwood Road or Drive. So the generator failed its load testing at the last test we did. Our generator maintenance contractor, Kintech, discovered that, did some investigation and determined that the engine is seized. There was oil in it, everything was maintained as it should be, it just seems that the engine failed. The generator is 12 years old, and likely the generator portion suffered some damage when the engine seized. So staff is recommending a replacement of the generator with an 80 kilowatt Kohler with Douglas Field Service doing the installation.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
So I have a motion by Councilman McLeod to approve. I have a second by Councilman Beavers. Do we have any discussion?
Appreciate all the due diligence your whole group is using to keep us moving and keep our waste going the way it's supposed to go.
I guess my only question to this would be, is it something that is, I know you're going to say yes, but I'm going to ask a question anyway. Is it something that is time critical to where we need to do it right now, or could we wait until budget and put it in budget?
It is a more time critical issue. We do want to have a backup power in case we do have a power outage. What happens is the pumps don't operate, and within, depending on the level of sewage flow, that lift station will fill up, and then you'll have overflow out of manholes.
That's a heavily used lift station.
Yeah, I figured you were going to say that, but I just wanted to make sure we got it on the record.
We don't want sewer in the road.
No. No. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 11, discussion and possible action regarding CenterPoint Energy's 2018 Annual Gas Reliability Infrastructure Program, otherwise known as GRIP, filing request.
Just really quick on this. This happens every year. They propose a rate increase. Council has the option to postpone that rate increase for 45 days, and that's what this ordinance is for.
Right, and we do that to give the Lawton Law Firm, which is the collection of cities, time to examine it to see if they're going to oppose it or not. So the prudent move is to oppose, and that gives them time to examine whether or not there's a reason to fight it or not.
Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the ordinance.
Second.
Do I have a motion by Councilman McLeod? I have a second by Councilman Raymaker. Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 12, discussion and possible action regarding the purchase of a police Tahoe.
Make a motion we approve.
I think we're going to get a presentation. But I agree, it's better when they're not on foot.
This is going to be from Lone Star Products and Parkway Chevrolet. They do a Tahoe every year for the sheriff show up in Dallas, and they called us and asked us if we would do a recommendation for them. And they said if we do that, they'd build it just like we build ours. And by doing that, instead of having to bring it back and strip all the equipment out and try to sell a Tahoe after they do it, and it'd have 400 miles or so on it, they called me and told me if we would give them a recommendation that they would leave the equipment in it and sell us the Tahoe for strictly the Tahoe's price. We have to pay to put our video in it and pay to put our decals on it. So we get the equipment for free, which saves the city a little over $15,000. So we're paying just for the Tahoe, the video equipment, and the decals. So it's a little early for next year, but it counts as one of the Tahoes for next year.
My motion's still staying.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion by Councilman Broad. I have a second by Councilman McLeod. Do I have any discussion?
I think it's just a fantastic opportunity. I'm glad we were made aware of this opportunity to save the city quite a bunch of money and all that outfitting.
Good work, Chief.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Good work, Chief. Thank you. Item 13, discussion regarding a policy and standard for a citywide code of ethics. Mr. Fletcher?
So this is something I think our city's way overdue for, and first let me thank Debbie for all the help that she's brought in gathering code of ethics and conducts and procedures from other cities. But this is something I think is long overdue in our city, and something that I'd like for us to consider. Obviously, it's just discussion now. There's a lot of work, but I think we kind of need some specific direction, and that's why I wanted to bring it before council now, so we can begin the process of adopting either procedures or policies and/or an ordinance. But this would be something that would be utilized by not just council, but across the board citywide, staff, any committees. We can make it as in-depth as we want to, or as surface. Could be included for volunteers as well, anybody that's going to represent our city overall. I think again, just kind of bringing it before council to try to get direction if we want to proceed or not, and then kind of some directions as to thoughts on how to proceed. Again, if we want to consider it as a policy, or if we want to actually create an ordinance, or if we want to include disciplinary actions, annual training or certifications. It also talks in here a little bit about procedures and decorum, so that would involve city meetings, not just for council meetings, but as well as MDD, P&Z, any committee meetings, town hall meetings, joint sessions, anything like that. And just kind of adopt and identify a general policy for the city overall.
Ted, I'll say I agree that we need to proceed with this. I think it's a good idea. I know several people also feel it's a good idea. We've got Farmers Branch documentation to review and digest. It's quite lengthy. But
well, there's a couple of them.
Well, there's about 5 different cities in there.
Right.
And I didn't include all of them. I mean, Dallas was 100 and some pages, and it was too large for our scale, obviously. El Paso was the same. So I just kind of grabbed some of the ones that I went through and read that I thought were more appropriate for our size of city. But I did put them in order of preference, if you would, of kind of how they would apply more to our city, or as I saw it. But y'all, like I say, if you can digest some of that and give direction for moving forward.
Exactly. We're going to have to figure out what we want to champion and what we want to leave behind.
Absolutely.
As well. And there's a lot to consider.
Ted, Thanks for bringing this back, because 2 years ago when I brought this up, this was totally squashed by the current city council at that time. So I'm really happy to be able to discuss this now.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I do wonder, it's looking at all these policies, I read the Farmers Branch one, and I kind of went through some of the rest of them. I kind of glanced through the rest of them. It's a lot to consider, and if we want to make some progress, we may want to move in smaller chunks, kind of like deal with this piece and then deal with this piece. So I'm just,
Bill's agreeing with you wholeheartedly there.
Well, what I'm interested in, if you like the Farmers Branch model, then I think let's start and work with it as kind of a working model to go with.
Like Mike said, I read Farmers Branch, and I just glanced through the others.
And there's some stuff you want to put in and take out, and I guess my concern is, even Farmers Branch is a city that's significantly different than ours, and it's got some stuff in there that I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not sure that really applies to us. And so I just think trying to get an entire, I doubt, maybe they did, I don't know their history, but maybe they did it all at once, but I'm guessing they did it in pieces and then kind of brought everything together.
I think that's the more reasonable approach. Absolutely. It gives you time to deal with manageable sections.
Yeah.
I'd like to set up a workshop possibly too, Mr. Mayor. I think that might be needed. I'm not advocating when or how long.
I'll be happy to give you the material so you can run that workshop.
You're championing this one.
I like the idea of having a code of ethics. I don't know about having a disciplinary action that goes along with it, but I do think that we need to do maybe there's a yearly, I don't want to call it training, but sort of a yearly awareness, if you will. I think that's a great idea. I think if you look at any, again, I always go to the private sector. If you look at any business, there are just certain core elements that periodically you need to sort of freshen up your people on, and I think this is the kind of thing that we probably ought to just have put back in front of us. And I say us, I mean everybody. In here, it doesn't just talk about mayor and council and staff. It talks about residents. I think it even mentions, and one of them it talked about vendors that come to meetings. So no, I think it's a great idea. I think that anybody that would be afraid of something that had to do with establishing ethics, that would worry me. So thanks for the work on it.
Yes, thank you, Ted.
Okay, any more discussion? If not, we will move on to item 14, which is ratify the accounts payable for the month of March 2018. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion by Councilman Raymaker.
Second.
Have a second by Councilman Fletcher. Any discussion?
I did have a question, and maybe something the attorney and maybe Lisa can ask. On the first page, there's a line item for Lloyd, Gosling, Rochelle, and Townsend for legal services, TCQ, and Old Tamina.
Yeah. Lloyd Gosling is our the law firm that we use for public utilities and certificates of need and necessity. When Tamina filed its application, it first appeared they were seeking more than we had agreed to permit them to do. And so Lloyd Gosling got with them, went through. I actually think Tamina may have modified their request very slightly, but that's what that was for, and then told us what Tamina was requesting was what we had agreed to. And that's what the legal fees are for.
Okay, so we're all done with that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that was a one-time thing. I just want to make sure that was a one-time deal. And
correct.
Okay.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 15, City Administrator's comments.
Yes, earlier this month, we met with the HR consultant, and Gail Merriweather was the came out to visit with city staff. She spent a couple of days meeting with department heads. She met with me a couple times, and she took a look at all of our HR paperwork, and basically doing what we had asked their company to do, to take a look at our HR. You know, since we don't have our own HR department, it was a very good opportunity for department heads to discuss some issues with her, ask questions. And I met with her before she actually left town, and she kind of gave me an overall feeling for the meeting. She's also going to be writing up a report to submit to the city. But one of the things that she mentioned that stood out to me, because she emphasized it, was that the city should begin looking at doing some sexual harassment training, some sensitivity training. And so that we've already started that process as staff, reaching out to some individuals to get some pricing, to get some of those trainings lined up. I felt that was important to get started as soon as she mentioned it to us. But that's that update. Also had a Blyle Engineering sent us a disclosure letter, a potential conflict of interest. So there's a developer, Achy Legs, LLC. I'm not making that up. They're looking at a piece of land off of Country Lane, which is currently in our ETJ, but it's outside of our city limits. And Achy Legs has hired Blyle Engineering as their engineering firm, and the letter is just to notify us, as you know, they're required by the Texas Professional Engineers, just to let us know, and the city attorney can have some comment.
Well, right now, the piece of land that they're talking about, we could not annex because it's not contiguous with the city. However, we anticipate from conversations that this group may ask at some point in time the city to provide water and sewer. We don't know that for sure, but right now I have no issue, and I don't see any conflict at all. In fact, somewhat to the opposite, I certainly, if those people did build infrastructure, I would want it built to the city's minimum standards, just in the event that sometime in the future they did request annexation.
And as I said, it was a potential. It was a letter that Blyle Engineering wanted to issue, just to follow, like I said, the Texas Engineering Practice Act. And also, this was mentioned in MDD. Also wanted to mention it to council. The pool shade has been completed. If you recall, that was funded through the MDD. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, you can swing by and take a look at it, or go when the pool is open, obviously, and enjoy the shade of it. But it's a very beautiful structure, and I think it's going to be very well received by the residents. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Joseph. Okay, so we will move into our second Citizens Forum. Again, citizens are invited to speak for 3 minutes. Please approach the podium and please state your name for the record. And first up is Ms. Jano Houston.
Again, thank you, Council, for allowing me a second time to speak. I just want to finish one thought and then conclude. And I wanted to hear what we had to say tonight, because we've been talking about $360,000 for the CVB, for the golf tournament. And I'm just going to be candid with you, because I really do intend to be intellectually honest. It doesn't matter to me if you don't have this event, and I'm okay with it if you don't. But it came from CVB money, and that money can only be spent in very specific ways. So the reason I want to bring that up is because when we come back and we talk about the lawsuit, as far as I can find, on a previous agenda item, the amount that was listed to be paid out was $450,000. And that didn't come out of a CVB budget. That came out of something that could have been spent on whatever. And so my whole point here is, if somebody is accountable, and if that person's name is Gene Teague, that person's name is John Houston, hold them damn well accountable. Name names, make it happen. But if it's a situation where nobody on the city was accountable for it, then stop making political comments that go against them. And here's what I want to say. It has been, this could be a political issue, Councilman Beavers, because all of us know who the project manager was. And it wasn't Mr. Pert. If you want to talk about it in a public forum, we can have a public conversation about it. But up until now, nobody has brought this up. It didn't get political until a Facebook post by you. And I'm just going to finish with this example. If I hired a contractor to remodel my kitchen for $450,000, contractor came in, performed demolition, completed shoddy construction, and left me with cracked countertops and unfinished floors, for weeks I try to get the contractor to come back and finish the work, contractor won't show. Finally, I have to get someone else to finish my kitchen because it has to get done. The other contractor does a wonderful job. And the job that he does is still being enjoyed by my family, even to this day. Now the first contractor comes back, let's call them Screw Scrape, for example. And they come back to me and they want me to pay him, her, for not paying for the completely unacceptable work. Not to mention the fact that I already paid someone to fix what was not completed. Would any reasonable, logical person pay Screw Scrape $450,000 for not doing work? So I'm just going to leave with this. It shouldn't be residents first, shouldn't be businesses first, shouldn't be staff first or politics first. It should be principles first. And in a way, you behave as though you've never spoken to previous city council members when you and I both know 100% sure you have asked previous city council for their input on certain projects. I've asked to meet with Councilman McLeod. He's met with me. I've asked to meet with Mayor Wheeler. I talk to Charlie every week. Please don't make it seem as though we never try to reach out. Last summer, I reached out with you in an email, and you told me that you wouldn't meet with me or my group, even though I gave you names, and even though I gave you agenda items, and I limited our meeting to 30 minutes. If you would like to meet with me, I would be happy to do with it. I would be happy to do that, but TOMA does not prevent you from doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Houston. Okay, next up, Ms. Teresa Dans.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Teresa Dans. I live at 602 Hickory Ridge. The other gentleman that was up here mentioned something about a clean race. I'm going to assume he didn't see this flyer when he said that. As far as I'm concerned, it's a filthy, dirty race. I was one of the unfortunate people to receive a flyer put out by Gary Henson. The lies and allegations in this flyer were unbelievable. It said Mayor Wheeler lost a lot of staff, including the police chief, the assistant chief, the finance and CVB director, and the city administrator. Of course, we all know the truth behind that fiasco. That was all on you, Mr. Henson, and the past city council. Those people left when you were here. The city, and the statement that the city has TOMA violations is an out-and-out lie. The article in the Courier was generated by you and your buddies. You talk about vetting and the personal problems of members of city council. How about vetting yourself? We all have a few skeletons we don't want sneaking out of that closet. How about you, Mr. Henson? Also, I've heard the district attorney is still investigating the false accusations made by Gary Henson against Kathy Ryer. I hope you dig deep into this and expose any and all people involved. In my opinion, Gary Henson did not act alone. I think he is a puppet and someone is pulling the strings. I also think he is running for mayor so he can cause as much turmoil as he can with the city staff and the city council. So please, Chief Shaw, keep on this, and if necessary, press charges and let the residents of Shenandoah know what a horrible person this man is. And to you, former Pastor Hanson, and Jesus said, "But I tell you that men will give account on the day of judgment for every careless word they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned." One other thing I'd like to say for Mrs. Houston, as she turned to all of us and said she'd love to meet with us and talk to us. A few months ago, Miss Houston called Lori Ehrman and asked for my number, that she wanted to speak to me. I called her and I said I'd be glad to meet with her over coffee. My one thing was she was not to bash anyone on city council or that worked for the city of Shenandoah. Needless to say, I have never heard from Miss Houston again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dance. Okay, we will move into item 17, which is council's inquiry, and we will start with Councilman McLeod.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Mayor, for helping proactively address some of these traffic issues and then overall your leadership in the past 2 years. It was my privilege to vote for you early on Tuesday, and I hope others will do as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Councilman. Councilman Broad?
Well, the mayor and myself and Debbie Pilcher and Stephanie Konzelman went to the golf match last week.
No, it was a couple of days ago.
A couple of days ago.
Feels like last week.
It feels like last week, I'd say. A couple of days ago. And we got, just to let council know, we've got a very nice letter from the I can't remember what the CSCA. That they are so appreciative of the city of Shenandoah for the support that we provided and created an incredible environment and experience for our student athletes. And they want to follow us sometime soon to get the perspective on the city on how this event went for us guys, and if we would be interested in a similar arrangement in the future, perhaps 2020. Now, the team that won was Southwestern University, and Trinity was next, and then Sanitary, UT Dallas, Schreiber, and Texas Lutheran. And it went into overtime. Several of them, we got a chance to watch them, the overtime on the 18th hole. We saw a lot of whoops in the water, so it was a it was a good event. But they seem to be very happy, and that's what counts for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Broad. Councilman Beavers?
Nothing tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Fletcher?
Just a couple things. One, I just want to again thank staff for all the hard work that they do, and I normally don't say this, but I feel very confident in speaking on behalf of all council, maybe not including Mr. McLeod, because evidently we don't agree that often. But I just want you guys to know how proud we really are of the job that each one of you do and the extra effort each and every day that you make to create an environment for our residents, to make it such a great place to live. I also apologize for sometimes the position that you're all put in, especially in a political environment. Y'all don't deserve that. But let me also say this to those that feel they can come into our city and verbally abuse our staff. You need to think again. Our staff does not work for you. They work for the benefit of all citizens in the city of Shenandoah. They're not your personal assistants. They're not here to do, to jump when you say, jump. They do an incredible job each and every day. And if you think you're going to come into our city and verbally abuse them, that's not going to happen anymore. Again, staff, I do apologize for sometimes the positions that you all are put in from time to time, but you guys do a wonderful job. And Don't wear or own something that somebody puts on you that doesn't belong to you. And then two other things real quick. One, I know that we have Shenandoah information signs all around our city, but we're kind of neglecting in a few places, and I was wondering if we might be able to address those spots. One, all three spots actually are around our apartment buildings. Oak Haven across the way, the park at Woodmore, and then over here in Sunningdale. So I don't know what it would take to order 3 additional signs to get them up in those locations, so everybody's included in the messages that are put out within our city. That being said, the second part of that is that I know sometimes it's difficult to get communication out to everybody that's within our city, and I think our staff does a great job in doing that with our Facebook, our constant contact, our website. There's a lot of ways to get information about what's going on within our city. I know that we also send things out in our water bills, but I also know it's difficult for some that aren't computer savvy and for those that don't receive water bills to constantly get communications about what's going on in our city. So I was wondering if we might look at some ways that we can step out of the box, if you would, to provide information to those residents that, again, wouldn't have any other means of receiving that information. Whether that's, again, in our senior communities and apartment complexes, if there's a way that we can send ahead information to the apartments that they can put into their event calendars, because they send those event calendars out every month to their residents, and that would help inform them of what's going on within our city and help them to become more inclusive part of who we are as well. And we used to do a quarterly mailing. I don't know if we want to consider doing something like that, or work with the Civic Club and possibly putting something together like that. Charlie, maybe you and I can bring that up in Civic Club this next month and talk a little bit about that. But those are my thoughts for this evening. So, and again, thank you, Mayor, for the great job that you've done, not just the year that we've been here, but for the 2 years that you've been in office. I greatly appreciate your ambitiousness to get out and make relationships outside of our city, because the things that happen outside of our city have a direct impact in our city. And if we're not aware of those things, then it can be a heck of a surprise when we get hit with it, because they're definitely not coming into our city to let us know this is what's happening. So I, for one, am greatly appreciative of you building those relationships for the last 2 years. It makes a difference. It truly does.
Thank you, Councilman Fletcher. Councilman Rainmaker? Bill?
How many TOMA violations have we had in the last year?
None.
None. Yet Gary Henson claims it twice in his latest flyer. But Mr. Henson seems to like to make up his own facts and lies. Like how good a manager he is when he's never been one. He makes more promises in this flyer than he has accomplishments in 6 years on city council. This flyer insults and demeans city staff by calling them unprofessional. Our current department heads are extremely capable, and we freed them from the tyranny and micromanagement of Henson's era. They could never even speak with council members for fear of their jobs due to the previous administration's petty insecurities. Our latest employee survey indicates how truly happy our current staff is. But attacking staff is nothing new for Mr. Henson, who supported that awful regime. He filed false charges against our interim city administrator, for which he's now being investigated himself. His only possible rationale was his misogynistic view of who the city administrator should be, trying to run off the only highly qualified female candidate for the role. And then he expects not to be called out for insulting our staff and leveling false charges. I have news for you, Mr. Henson. If you attack my people, you'll be hearing from me. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman Raymaker.
I did have one more thing that I wanted to, calendar was a comment. I would like us to look at coming up with a unified city calendar and even perhaps a community calendar, the difference between all the different city events, because we do a lot of stuff in the city. It's between the Civic Club and all the different groups in the city that perform things. And then the idea with the community calendar would be reaching out a little bit further to talk about stuff that would be available. But if we could think about putting that on a future agenda, I think that would be something that would be useful for the public.
Yeah. So you mean in addition to the calendars on the website, just adding more stuff to it, basically?
Yeah,
make it a little more robust.
Open it up, okay. Make it a little more robust, make it easy to find, make it easy for people to link to, because you can throw
sure, SharePoint.
Something like that. We can make it a little bit more engaging. Basically, give reason for people to jump on there. And
yeah, I like it. I like it.
Part of that would be troublesome with our current website.
Oh, I agree, and that's part of.
But that'll be a budget item. So.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll go last. I actually want to address one of the comments that was made during citizens forum, and that was about the trash bash. So in previous years, we had never filled up 3 dumpsters, and so we had 3 dumpsters, and then and I don't remember the size of them. Joseph knows way better than I do. And then we have like one small little dumpster that we keep here on site. Well, in previous years, we'd never filled up 3 of them. And so, correct me if I say something wrong here, but this year we filled up 4, plus our little dumpster. And so it was way in excess of what we had ever seen historically, which is why we ended up running out of space. To Chief's credit, I think some of your guys said they started noticing that maybe some of the residents or some of the people showing up weren't residents, and we never really had to worry about that before. But this year, we did start to notice that, and your guys actually started to mitigate that some. So
we checked. We actually checked. Every person that dropped off was checked for resident status, so there was no non-residents dumping.
That's correct, and that is a program we started this year, just because we had seen. In the past, a lot of non-residents were taking advantage of the program.
So it was unfortunate that we ran out of room, and that there were some folks that were turned away. We hate that. We obviously want it to be successful for all the residents. Unfortunately, it was one of those historic events where we just got more than what we'd ever seen before. And we'll learn from it, and we'll do better next year. So nobody's perfect. I think staff did a great job. I think they tried to plan ahead of time for an increase. We just didn't know it was going to be that big of an increase. Other than that, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks everybody for staying as long as you did. I hope y'all enjoyed the I-45 study presentation as much as I did. I hope y'all took down Patrick's email address and his phone number. Please, 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 if you're watching online as well, give them your input, give them your ideas. They're still in the planning stage. This isn't going to happen tomorrow. By their own admission, they're saying that this is about 10 years off. So we have plenty of time to give them our input. But if we don't give them our input, then we really can't complain about anything that they do. So make sure you let them know what your thoughts are. We're going to move into executive session, so y'all can stick around if you want, but if not, have a great night. Oh, absolutely.
On that day, Debbie did a fantastic job of getting a notice out before 11 o'clock on Constant Contact to make sure that as many people as possible knew in advance that the trash was full.
Great, appreciate that. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, so we're going to move into executive session, and we are going to discuss personnel matters, the city administrator position, and the city secretary position. And we will move into executive session at 8:36.
Yeah, it's pretty much shot. I was wondering if this would make it did.
Thanks, sir.
My concern.
Are you? You see the one basically basically, she hated the keyboard, so she went and bought another one. Of course, now that one's having video issues. She likes the Dell keyboard.
I know, like, Shenandoah is divided into yeah,
I don't know. I don't Facebook. So
that's a good idea, actually. Yeah, that's a good idea.
All the new guys.
I don't know what to tell you.
They get a copy of it.
How often do y'all go back and revisit it? Is there like once a year? I don't want to call it training, but you know, once a year training.
We're going to start doing those on office once a year.
Okay.
Once a year, which is part of.
I don't know how long we'll be.
Part of it. Which we used to only do when we got there.
It's a good idea to do periodic. Just to kind of give everybody, sort of put it back on the radar. Just like sensitivity training or sexual harassment training. I mean, sometimes you just bog down knowledge once a year that it's like, you know, you got to pick and choose, but maybe you do like take like one day and you get like 3 or 4 days.
Good, how are you doing?